January of 2021. There were already a lot of changes on the surface, but cleaning up the rebellion proved to be quite a challenge. This wasn't going to last long, however. The majority of the people the rebels were fighting for didn't even want any part of this. And these weren't all reconditioned. The number of free-thinking people that wanted this kind of society to last was growing by the minute. They believed that Odette was doing something right. This kind of government was what the Philippines needed right from the very beginning. Aulin's freedom fighters were just out to destabilize things. Envious veterans of wars that were fought at a completely different time in the past. The country should change. And for these people, radicals should be removed completely. But Zorro disagrees. Anyone who had gone through UP Diliman knew this mysterious masked man. He would be seen strolling casually at Commonwealth, the Quezon City Circle, all the way to the insides of the campus, where he would help out people crossing the streets. Sometimes he would even give high fives to joggers. A costumed man emulating a Western hero wasn't weird here in the campus, most especially because he really wasn't a dangerous person. He was just different in a very fun way. All that changed when the pandemic hit. There were no more people in schools, and going out was already a health risk. During the time the giant capre monsters were wreaking havoc in the cities, he was able to shelter a few survivors. Most of them were children, and among them was Denise's son, Vinny. After the owl had returned, there were people urging him to go with them to the owl's nest. It was safer there. It was a place where the Viper Queen's forces could never enter. But, as expected, he chose to stay outside of the nest. A few months later, one of the children Zorro had tried to protect was snatched right outside of the owl's nest. Vinny was out here right now with the reconditioned. It's already assumed that Vinny will be used to create one of those reanimated soldiers by the Viper Queen. At the moment, Zorro doesn't know any of these details. His priority was to keep safe from the Apophis. But that soon changed when 3 of these undead soldiers tried to find him. Zorro was breaking curfew laws, but also he was in full costume. Costumed individuals are to be captured immediately. He drew out his toy gun and pointed it towards the soldiers. This immediately registered Zorro as an armed enemy in the heads-up displays of the soldiers. So they lunged at him to take him down. But Zorro wasn't just any costumed man. He was also still very agile and was able to duck away from their assaults. He drew out his toy sword, believing that this was going to wound these super soldiers. Surprisingly, he was still able to smack them at the back of their heads with a plastic sword. Zorro yelled at them, knowing that these were the Viper Queen's henchmen. The soldiers corrected themselves and recalibrated their settings in order to take down this unusual suspect. One of them got to grab a handful of his black cape, and this immediately broke his balance, hitting his head on the concrete. The great Zorro was dazed, a very dangerous state to be in, fighting against the Apophis. Seeing that their enemy is almost incapacitated, they proceeded to remove his mask. It was just a normal old man behind it. Zorro, for that very split second, was gone. Suddenly, all the color went away, and the sound of the trees and wind were replaced by some droning, robotic sound, much like a jamming frequency that humans could hear. The super soldier systems automatically tried to call in for backup, but every signal was already jammed. Across the street, in one of the benches facing the sunken garden, stood the owl. The three reanimated soldiers ran towards the owl to attack him. The owl leapt backwards towards the center of the garden. He wanted to draw them out one by one. Owl knew that this was the very first time he'd face these new super soldiers. As one of them got close enough, the owl finally unfolded his arms and casually punched the super soldier square on the forehead. Owl looked calmly as the reanimated soldier stood back up and shook his head. The owl decided to record all of the data that can be recorded as he fought the super soldiers. These ones were a bit tougher than usual, but after a while they were also neutralized. The new systems developed by the Apophis were indeed advancing. Luckily, Owl was also developing tech that would adapt to these changes. He was hoping that the recorded data would further help him with this. He then turned off his disrupting field, and the color of the world returned. He noticed Zorro, groggy but okay. Owl sat him by one of the trees and scanned him for injuries. Zorro thanked the owl. He noticed that this superhero was also helping him and asked if he and the owl were finally going to start a group, much like the Avengers or the Justice League. The owl flatly said no. But he said he was indeed looking for help and asked the Zorro if he could do it. With a sparkle in his eyes, the old man's fighting spirit was renewed. However, Zorro thought he might not be much of a help, as he only carries toy weapons. Owl removed the claw from one of his gauntlets and commanded the AI to shape itself as a sword. The small 4-inch metal claw slowly molded itself into the shape of a classic rapier sword. Next, he sliced off a piece of his cowl, then ordered the AI to shape it as a mask and cape with a magnetic field that would help protect the wearer. The owl handed these to Zorro and asked if he would be able to collect more survivors and then lead them back to the owl's nest. Owl said that he needed these people to start the revolution. He asked Zorro if he was willing and was able to do this. Zorro took his sword, gazed at it lovingly, and slowly wore his new mask. As if speaking to an audience, Zorro exclaimed that he will finally bring justice in this world that had turned blind.